Привit, привit! Laskavo próximo. Time for another Quicktools sketch. This week it's going to be desert rocks, perhaps to go with those cacti that I did last week. Ви готові? This character here is from the Blender Foundation website. I'll leave a link down in the description. Let's set his visibility to in front in his object properties so he stays visible. Cool. Now in front view, let's zoom out, way out, so we can fit some really big shapes in here. I want these rocks to be really imposing. Shift F to launch quick shape, of course. At the moment, I'm thinking only in terms of silhouette, but seeing as I can work in 3 dimensions all at the same time with quick shape, I might as well set some brush depth too with the F key. Now, I like to start off with straight lines because I don't want to worry about details at all at this stage. I'll just block out the simplest shapes I possibly can. And I'm going to use the N-gon brush for this. So Shift Q to toggle to that brush. Now, the way this one works is I press and drag. I'm on a Wacom here. So on a normal mouse, that would be a left button drag. And that starts it off, and you'll see a line gets dragged out behind the cursor. Then I just move the mouse, click, move the mouse, click, wherever I want the next corner to be placed. Once I know where the last point needs to be, I just right-click to confirm the shape. Okay, so just quickly sketching in some really tall rocks here, kind of Monument Valley style. And I really do want to keep these shapes absolutely as simple as possible. Right, we've got our basic scene set up. Now let's get into detailing these rocks a bit. Again, using quick shape. I'm going to focus on this one sort of rock tower behind the hero here, and I'm going to use the ancient sculpting technique of chipping loads of bits off. Just a word about navigation here. It can be a bit tough to figure out where a shape is going to be made in Quicktools and how it's going to be oriented. Just like with anything, it's a matter of practice, but there are a couple of tips I would give you. So first, remember that by default, Quicktools is using two values. One is the position of the 3D cursor, and the other is the angle of your viewpoint. And it uses those two values to calculate the position and the orientation of shapes. That means that shapes and cuts are going to be made perpendicular to the surface of your monitor, really, perpendicular to where you're looking from. And it's going to do it by default level with the 3D cursor. And you can see what I mean in this little demo scene that I've made. See, this pink plane here represents where Quicktools is going to operate. And this camera here represents my viewpoint. Now, I'm going to go into this other viewport here. If I change that viewpoint by moving that camera, remember that's pretending to be my viewpoint, say GX, escape from that, or I could move the location of the 3D cursor. I've put these empties in here to represent the 3D cursor. You see what effect that has on the orientation and location of the Quicktools workplane. And because the 3D cursor is so important, I sometimes use the shortcut Shift right click just to position the 3D cursor whilst I'm working. I'd also advise switching between these different alignment settings that you can see at the bottom of the Quicktools UI, and that just depends on where you are and how you want your cuts to be made. Sometimes I'll use Alt-W first click position, and sometimes W just to align to view, or I can hover over a face and tap W to align to that face. The other tips I would give you are Blender settings rather than Quicktools. I'd say that while sculpting, I often find it easiest to rotate around the workpiece itself. So in preferences, I'll go to navigation, orbit around selection. I've also, beneath that, changed this rotation angle to 5 degrees. That's about the steps, the rotation steps. So when I'm back in my viewport, if I tap numpad 4 or numpad 6, I get this quite fine control over the rotation, just 5-degree rotation at a time. And the same goes for shift 4 or shift numpad 6, and that rolls the view, again, in those 5-degree increments. Finally, I find it easier to work with cavity switched on. That's up in your viewport overlays, down near the bottom there, switch cavity on. I have it set to both world and screen. Okay, let's get into it. First, I want to refine the profile of this rock by chopping some large chunks away. These are the big secondary details. I'm going to set my brush to cut right through the rock with the shortcut C. C for cut through. And since I'm only changing the silhouette here with this pass, I'll tap W to align to view. Set my brush to N-gon if it isn't already, Shift Q. Okay, click and drag. And now I hold Control to make this into a cutter. You see I get this red highlight. When your shape is the way you want it, right click to confirm. Just a few biggish cuts here and there, just to bring a bit more interest to the profile. Another thing I could do is maybe take some quite big but shallow slabs off the side. So I could set my brush depth quite small here and just go around making some kind of shallow but large recesses here and there to the shape. Right, for the next stage, I want to get into some secondary details. Big ones, like big grooves and cracks right across the surface. Now, let's just do a cut, say, from top view. Take a look at that, and often I probably don't want to have this kind of crack be perpendicular up and down or across a surface sometimes, but not always. So what I could do, if I want a crack to be diagonally across a surface, I could start in an orthographic view, say right view, numpad 3, and then roll slightly off that view just with numpad 8 or numpad 2. And my cuts are still going to be sort of parallel with the surface, but if I now take a look at this, you can see that's gone across the surface at an angle. And of course, when I want a cut just to go part way into a surface, well, then I can just by eye, by hand, just slightly come off the orthographic view. And then I get one of these nice wedge shaped and one of these sharp cuts. And of course, as you know, if I want to cut to a specific depth, I can switch off the cut through function with the shortcut C and just set my cutting depth with the F key. You can add shapes to your sculpt by holding Control and Shift whilst you draw. For example, if I wanted to add, say, another tower of rock here, I could shift right click to place the cursor where I want this tower sort of to be. Then I could hop into front view, W to align to view, Shift G. The direction should maybe be neutral around that 3D cursor. Again, set the depth or the thickness with F. And I'm going to drag out a shape with the N-gon tool. And then hold Control and Shift, and you should get a yellow highlight. Right click to confirm. And there you are. An extra bit of geometry has been added there. Okay, I've now broken this primary shape into a few secondary shapes. And now it's time to add some tertiary details, the little details. Make it look a little bit more interesting, a little bit more natural. And I'm going to use exactly the same processes as we've seen so far. I will admit that initially it does take a little bit of getting used to, where the cuts are going to be made, etc. But once you click with it, once you get it, you'll find it's a really natural way of working and much speedier than traditional poly modeling, say. Well, thanks for watching, and as ever, do zустрічі! 3D from Zero makes tutorials and tips about 3D software. If you're into 3D, or you'd like to be, check out my free course on 3dfromzero.com, and there are some paid courses there too. Thanks for watching.